Okay, this is part 3. Sorry about the lack of intro in part 2, but we all know that was part 2. This is part 3. Okay. What, you think I need to confront my feelings so I can move past them? You suck, Angeal. If you don't turn it off, or at least make it normal again, I'm telling the whole world you used to sleep with a stuffed Moogle. The hologram continued to blink in confusion, and Zack had to cling to his anger and repress the urge to grin. He always known Sephiroth was hot. He'd never imagined the General could look so adorable. Fine, okay, fine. Clearly, you enjoy humiliating me, and you're not going to let this go. Zack, standing about 10 feet from the General now, looked him defiantly in the eyes. I love you. I am completely, totally, head over heels, giggly like a schoolgirl, can't think about anything else, can't fight you, or even form a coherent thought in your presence, hopelessly, uselessly in love with you. And Angeal thinks I'm distracted by this feeling, and that's why he's making me babble like an idiot at a hologram. And he's probably right, but that doesn't change the fact that he's a sadistic bastard who needs to get laid and stop calling me puppy in front of the other soldiers. Now that I've made a complete fool of myself, would you please just stab me in the heart and end this? Because I think that might actually feel better than this. The hologram did not move. It had stopped blinking altogether. Sephiroth had not thought to check the control room first in his search for Angeal. It was reasonable enough to assume he might be lurking somewhere within the simulation itself, as this was clearly the laser scenario, as he had mentioned his student having a bit of trouble with this one. Sephiroth, when he wished to, was able to visually discern the difference between virtual and real, and a quick scan of the enormous ruin had been sufficient to show him that Angeal was not there. The only real thing was a young man near the center, being surrounded by more opponents than he could probably handle. Fair was Angeal's student, but he was a soldier, and every soldier was Sephiroth's responsibility, one he took with characteristic seriousness. Masamune was down and cutting through the air in holograms faster than even a split-second decision can make. When they were gone, Sephiroth stood and waited, curious about what the third class's reaction would be. Normally, a first meeting with a young soldier involves staring and stammering and often an uncomfortable silence, but he wondered if it might be different with Fair. It was. The boy seemed amazed at first, but quickly shifted into what seemed to be annoyance, and he began talking to Angeal in a way no one else, to Sephiroth's knowledge, had ever dared to. This seemed a peculiar way to behave in the presence of a soldier's general, but it was Sephiroth's own reaction that really puzzled him. Lieutenant Fair's file flashed in his head, a series of neatly organized stats and test scores that attested to a fine soldier in the making. But these were immediately pushed aside by the recalled memories of everything he had heard the first class say about Fair, to him or to each other. Angeal spoke with pride of Zack's skills. It strangely reminded Sephiroth of the way President Shinra had talked about Rufus. Even when Angeal complained about Fair's attitude or lapses in concentration, he smiled, which didn't make sense. And when Sephiroth told him so, Angeal shrugged and said, "When you meet him, you'll understand. Either that, or ask me to quietly kill him." Sephiroth didn't feel close to understanding anything at the moment, but he had to admit to himself that there was something humorous and pleasant about the way the boy waved his arms energetically and spoke so freely when most other men would have been intimidated into silence. These thoughts went through Sephiroth's brain in seconds, and one remained and repeated itself, like a flaw in a battle plan that glared at him from a map and would not stop until he resolved it. This was a fragment of conversation he had overheard between the Commander Dawson and Lieutenant Wellman a few weeks earlier. Dawson had asked the lieutenant if he had met the third class Angeal was training, and Wellman had answered, "Yeah, pretty thing, but I'm surprised the commander's putting up with all that noise and energy." Sephiroth had just decided that, yes, Fair was extremely attractive, especially his eyes, so pale and blue-green that the light of Mako made them almost colorless, when the boy began addressing him directly. What he said, and the heedless, desperate, utterly honest way he said it, made Sephiroth feel completely shocked, an unusually strong emotion for one of even his temperament. Love? Love was a friendly affection, like the kind Angeal expressed, or the fierce devotion of subordinates to their general. Fair did not seem to be expressing either of these, but rather a sort that Sephiroth did not know how to react to. It had always been something that had belonged to other people, normal people, and he had known as long as he had known anything that he was not normal. The boy had stopped talking and was watching him with a sad, defeated expression, holding his sword in wait for an attack. Sephiroth understood. Fair thought he was looking at the Sephiroth hologram that sometimes appeared in these simulations. He had a feeling that it would be best, at least spare Fair some embarrassment if he left now, as quickly as possible, and let the boy go on thinking he had been talking to a CG image. But Sephiroth didn't want to break eye contact and leave, and that was too puzzling. If this feeling in the pit of his stomach was discomfort, then why did he want to move closer instead of further away? Sephiroth's head was beginning to ache faintly, and it had nothing to do with the lieutenant's babbling monologue. With Masamune sheathed and his arms hanging uselessly at his sides, he stood unmoving until heavy, hurried footsteps behind him caught both his and Fair's attention, and they both looked. Angeal was approaching, and yet another thing that made no immediate sense, he seemed distraught. Sephiroth had not seen Angeal upset since the death of their friend Genesis a few years earlier. Seph, I'm sorry. This was my fault. I was trying to alter the difficulty level mid-program, and... Angeal paused and looked at Zack painfully and apologetically. I didn't get here fast enough. You mean... Zack choked out, glancing rapidly back and forth between the two of them as the healthy color drained from his face. Angeal checked the bizarre urge to hug the boy, which came uncomfortably often, and turned back to his old friend, wondering if he might be angry. Sephiroth was frowning, but not with anger. He looked hurt, sad, confused, feelings that even his closest friend did not often see in him. The confusion made sense, as Sephiroth was always puzzled when people cared about him, but the hurt, the sadness, they couldn't be because Zack looked so shattered, could it? The general was devoted to his men and protected them, ruthlessly if need be, but he was never good at empathizing with them. Sir, Fair was following my orders, and he had no idea it was really you. Sephiroth tore his eyes away from Zack and at last fixed it on Angeal, this time with a confusion that they both understood. Angeal didn't call him Sir. He never had. He was the only one permitted to address him with anything resembling a nickname. Fair has done nothing wrong, Angeal, nor have you. Thank you, Seph, the commander said, quietly. And that is the end of part 3. I'm sorry I'm really quiet right now. I'm kind of like... Yeah, it's 12:30 at night on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. And I'm trying to record everything. Again, so an awful lot of hiccups here and there. Trying to get this up for you. I'm sorry I'm taking so long. But yeah, so hopefully YouTube won't be a bitch. But, I'm running over the time limit. Alright, love you, and part 4 is up very, very soon. In like an hour from now. Okay.